Phil Ebner here with videoschoolonline.com and an awesome After Effects tutorial. I'm going to show you how you can create your own hologram effect right within After Effects. So let's dive right in to learn how. All right, so here's the effect that we're going to be recreating, this sort of hologram style effect that's coming out of a device. We're using a mobile phone. And a lot goes into this, but a few of the main things are just creating this sort of hologram style window, tracking it to in a device, making it animate up and down. And here are actually the steps that we're going to be going through. So we've got the hologram window and tracking. We're going to be creating the graphics. We're going to be stylizing it and giving it that hologram kind of effect. We're going to be adding some flare and light splash to make it look as good as possible. And so like all of my tutorials, take what you want. You can build it on your own. You can customize it. But overall, this is a pretty cool effect that we are able to create in just a few minutes right within After Effects. So I'm going to start out with this clip of my brother who is tapping on his phone and looking at his hologram display. So the first thing we're going to do is create sort of a window that we're going to actually track to the phone so that it actually looks like it's moving up and down with the motion of the phone. And that's one of the first things that you want. If you're having a hologram appear out of something else that is still in frame, then that's going to make this even easier. But let's dive right in, go up to Layer, New, Solid. Any color, it doesn't matter. I'm going to just choose black. I'm going to scale it down quite a bit. And then I'm just going to put it right above the phone for now. We can move it later on. Then to set up this tracking that we're going to do, go to Layer, New, Null Object. So this is sort of an invisible layer that we can apply motion and things to, and it's going to help us with our tracking. Next, I'm going to go on my timeline right after my brother taps on the phone. So right about there. And then I'm going to start tracking this layer, so the video layer. So make sure that's selected. Go to track the tracker over on the right-hand side and click Track Motion. We're going to set up this tracking point, and I'm going to put it right on the phone so that we can track this phone. I'm going to edit the target to make sure it's set to the null object, and then just analyze by pressing the play button to analyze further. Now I know I'm going very fast through this tutorial. I'm assuming that you know how to use After Effects already. If you don't, I definitely encourage you to actually enroll in one of our full After Effects courses. And I actually have a full premium After Effects course that will take you through everything. So it looks like this didn't work too well, so I'm actually going to reset and set a bigger tracking point. So let's make this a little bit bigger. We're going to make sure we're going right after he taps right there. And we're going to set it on the phone, just like so. And then scrub through. So I want to make sure that it's tracking the entire motion all the way to the end. So I'm going to let that do that, then we'll come back. So here in this shot, I had my brother kind of do a pinch and expand natural movement that we know from using tablets and things like that, as if he was trying to make the hologram bigger. So we're going to animate that as well. And then we're just going to let it go until he taps right there to close off the hologram. Give it a few seconds, a few frames to close out. And there we go. I'm going to press stop. Now I'm going to click apply. And what that does is it applies the tracking to the X and Y dimensions of the null object. So now you see that there's all these points that have been applied to the null object. So if I parent the black solid to the null object, it's actually going to move with the null object and therefore with the motion of the phone. Cool. So let's turn this solid layer into sort of a 3D shape. So I'm going to click the 3D column right there. And now we can rotate it around so that it looks like it's actually appearing from the phone. So right now it's just a black sort of rectangle, but we're going to be adding all of our information in there in just a second. So we've created the hologram window, we've tracked it. So now let's actually change that solid into a composition that we can put other assets and graphics into. So by selecting this layer, right-clicking, and choosing Pre-Compose, we're going to call this Hologram Window 2. And now if we double-click into that composition, we have this hologram window. Whatever we put in here will appear in this graphic here in this shot. So for example, if we take our agent, this was an image that we got from pixabay.com. If we put this here and then we delete our black solid, what happens if we go back to the hologram tutorial, this agent now appears right there. Same with our text. So if we type in some text, actually let me create a text box. So with the text tool, I'm going to just create a text box and I'll just say, type in your mission is to create your own hologram graphic. Do you accept? So we have this text on here. We can resize it, move it around. And again, if we go back to our main composition, the text now appears. And so it's backwards, but it's facing my brother, which makes sense. And so now we can do all kinds of things to make this look better. So I'm going to walk through some of the things that I did to make our hologram look like this, starting with this sort of panel right here. So the first thing, I'm going to create an oval that I'm going to place over my agent right here. So I'm just holding the Option key down as I click and drag to create an oval from the place where I clicked. Move it right over our agent, something like this. I might need to make my agent a little bit bigger. I'm going to put my agent on top of this circle. Let's call this circle. Let's scale up my agent, something like this. And now I want to make sure that my agent only appears within the circle. So I'm going to duplicate the circle. So Command D on a Mac, Control D on a PC. Make sure my agent extends all the way to the start of this clip. Now with this second circle up above, I'm going to go to my agent, which is now sandwiched between the two circles, and change the track matte of my agent layer to Alpha Matte Circle 2. Let's make sure that my Circle 2 actually has a fill instead of just a stroke. So now we're going to set our fill to white. And so now what's happening is our agent is appearing wherever this circle is. If I turn it back on, you see now this oval is right here, and it's using the track matte to say that our agent is going to appear in that oval. So that's a quick way to create sort of a framed image like that. Next, let's sort of create a frame for the entire page itself or the entire window. So I'm going to choose the rounded rectangle tool and just double click that to create a new shape. And then I'm going to take the scale, pressing S, drag it down. And then I'm going to take my fill and actually let's go down into our options. Within our shape, within the contents, within the rectangle, within fill, we're going to drop the opacity of the fill quite a bit, maybe down to like 10%. And then I'm going to drag the stroke up to 10 points or pixels. And then I'm going to drag this down to the bottom, and I'll call this window. So now we have this window, and if we go back to our main composition, we have this sort of layout, which is looking pretty good. All right, so one other thing that I'm going to do is animate this text. So one easy way to do that is with the typewriter effect. So if you go to your effects and type in typewriter, you see the animate in option. So just go ahead and drag that onto the text layer. If you press U, you see the keyframes, or you should see the keyframes with that layer selected. And this is the keyframe saying, make this text appear as if it's being typed on. So now it's all being written out at one speed. I'm going to have a little pause in between this first sentence and then the second sentence where it says, do you accept? So right here, going on my timeline, right about there, I'm going to set another keyframe. And then I'm going to move this last keyframe over to the right. And then I'm going to copy this keyframe, the one in the middle, about right here. So now it goes forward. There's a pause in the middle right here. And then it continues. Okay, see how that works? All right, so that's looking pretty cool. Let's add one more sort of stylistic thing that's going to make this a little bit more like a digital hologram style look, and that's with this fractal noise sort of graphic. It looks like it's a little distorted, and it looks pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is actually create a new solid. So press Command Y. Doesn't matter what color, and then go to our effects and presets and type in fractal noise. Put this onto that black solid, and you'll see that it adds this sort of cloudy fractal noise effect. I'm going to change the size of this. So if I go down to the transform properties in the effects and controls panel, and then I uncheck the uniform scaling, and for the width, actually for the height, I'm just going to put in 2, and then for the width, I'm going to stretch it out, something like 500 or so. And then for the contrast, I'm going to boost this up to 250, and then the brightness, I'm going to put in -50 for now. All right, so now I'm going to change the blend mode of this layer. So I'm going to go under mode. So if you don't see mode, click the toggle switches modes button down here and change to add. So now this is appearing on top of everything, but it's not animated. So in our hologram over here, we animated it. So it looks like it's sort of this digital thing that's trying to come through, but the reception might not be that great. So to animate it, we're going to animate the evolution right here. So if we option click, so that's on a Mac, alt click if you're on a PC, the stopwatch next to evolution, we have what's called an expression editor. And I'm just going to type in times, which is the asterisk marker, and then 500. And this creates sort of an animated, sort of organic animation of this sort of fractal noise. The next thing I want to do is make sure that this fractal noise is only appearing within this window that we had created with this outline. So I'm going to use a track mat. So first I'm going to duplicate this window, Command D, put this above the black solid, and then change the track mat for our fractal noise, which I'm going to rename so we know what it is right here. Change that to alpha matte. So now it's only appearing where this window is. But first, let me actually go in. Let's go into our setting for window, under contents, under fill, and make sure the opacity is up at 100%. And then actually you could either drop the opacity there, or for the fractal noise, drop the opacity just a little bit so it's not as intense. Something like 35 might be cool. Awesome. So now we have this sort of animated hologram screen. And if we go back to our hologram window, this is what it looks like. One thing that I did in my other one is we want to make sure that we animate this screen in. So after my brother presses the button, we're going to have it actually pop up. So what I'm going to do is go on my timeline right after it's pressed and say this is a good sort of end spot for it. I'm going to go to the hologram, press S to bring up scale and set a keyframe for there by clicking the stopwatch. Same for the position, press P, click the stopwatch. Now if I press U a couple of times, I'm going to see all the keyframes that I've set so far. Now I'm going to go back on the timeline till he's pressing right about there. And now I'm going to scale down to 0%. And then I'm also going to move it down. You can see where it is with this little icon right here. I'm going to move it down to where he's pressing it basically from. Okay, so now it should pop up. Cool. So we'll play around with the speed of that in just a second. Let's just set the keyframes for when he actually closes it and also makes it bigger. So here he goes in and is going to make the hologram bigger. So right here, I'm going to set a keyframe for position and scale again. He stretches it out. Let's increase this actual size to 50% and move it up. Next, let's go to the end where he taps it off. So here he taps, so set a keyframe there for both position and scale, and then go forward a little bit and scale down to 0. And we're going to also drag it down to where his finger taps again. So now we have all the motion of this hologram window popping up, scaling up, and then popping down. I just want to make sure that the motion looks a little bit better. So I'm going to select all of them, press F9 on my keyboard to add easy ease, or you can right click them, go to keyframe assistant and easy ease. And with these selected still, I'm going to go into my graph editor, which is this button right here. I'm going to select all the keyframes by dragging over them. If you don't see this graph, make sure you go down to this graph view option here and choose the speed graph and not the value graph. Then I'm going to go into any one of these, but this first one's probably easiest, and drag this first handle to the right and this second handle to the left. And so that makes it look a little bit better, and it's maybe a little too fast, but it gives it a little pop. So I'm going to extend this by dragging these two keyframes over to the right, so it's a little bit slower, but it still has more of a pop. And that motion just looks a little bit more natural to me. I am also going to add motion blur to the end at the end. So that will give us some cool motion blur and make it look a little bit more natural. But I'm going to not enable it right now by clicking this button so that it's not as render intensive. Wow, so we've done a lot, but I still feel like we have a lot to go. We want to add the tint, curves, and glow to the hologram in here so that it looks more like an actual hologram, or what we believe a hologram would look like. So let's go ahead and add first the tint effect, which we're going to do with the hue saturation effect. So there is an actual tint effect, but I just use the hue. So if you type in hue, you see this hue saturation. Apply this to the hologram window. Click colorize, and we're going to colorize it with more of a green. So just rotate the hue to where you like, green or a green blue or something like that. And then you can also increase the color saturation here with the colorize saturation. Another thing you can do is add some curves. So if you type in curves and apply the color correction curves effect, you can go into the different channels, such as the green or blue channels, and bring up the greens, bring up the blues by clicking and dragging this curve to really pinpoint what color you want. Maybe you want to decrease the reds to get rid of some of those reds, something like that. So that's looking pretty good. Next, we want to add some glow. So go to your effects presets, type in glow. Under stylize, drag that glow over there. And now we have to play around with these settings. So for the intensity, we're going to drop that down to like 0.3 or 0.2 maybe. For the radius, we're going to bump this up. Something like 150 or something might look best. And then let's drop down this glow threshold, maybe 15, something like that. Play around with these settings. You can change it, adjust it to how you want, what you think looks best. But this is one way to just get that nice glow look. Another thing you might consider doing is change the blend mode of this layer itself. So if you go to your mode column here again, if you change it from normal to something like screen or something like that, that gives you an even better sort of hologram look. One thing I remembered too, is under hue and saturation, I dropped the colorized lightness to something like -25 or something, and that adds some color to the white borders and edges here as well. You can even go further if you want. -50, that looks pretty good. And then back in the curves, then you can play around, and with the RGB curve, you can give it a little bit more contrast. All this is kind of up to you to see how much you want. Cool, so that is our next step, which was tint, curves, and glow. Now let's add a flare. So let's go ahead and add a new solid. We can do that by layer, new solid, or Command Y on a Mac. Again, it doesn't matter what color. In your effects and presets, type in lens flare. Drag this onto that new solid, and I'm going to rename this flare. I'm going to change the type to, let's see, 35, no, 105 prime is going to be looking good. And then we're going to change the blend mode. So we're going to change it from normal to add. Now let's change the flare center. I'm going to do that by taking this little target point and we're going to drag it down somewhere like so. We're going to put this beneath our hologram and we're going to decrease the brightness, something like 70. And I want to pair the motion of the flare to the motion of the phone as well. So I'm actually going to parent it to the hologram window. So I'm just going to take the pick whip for this layer and drag it to hologram window. So now as this moves around, it also moves the flare. The thing with the flare is that the flare actually affects the entire screen, and it's kind of hard for you to see, but if the phone goes too high, you start to see the edge of the screen where the flare is. If I change this to normal, you can see better. So see how you see the edge of this sort of clip? So what I actually want to do is I'm going to move the flare up, something like so. Move it up. Let's change it to screen again. And then let's move it down, the layer itself down, and not the flare center. And then I'm going to use a mask. So I'm going to take my pen tool. I'm going to set a point right here at the bottom. Here, clicking and dragging. Up here, up here, up here, over here, and then finish it off. So now this is sort of keeping that flare right within this mask. But I want to adjust the feathering. So selecting the flare, press F to bring up feathering, increase the feathering so it's more natural. So now with it moving around, you don't see the edge of the frame. One thing that I do want to do is add curves to the flare itself. So color correction curves, add it to the flare. And I'm going to go back up to my blue and green curve and increase that. So let's go up to green. So to give it sort of a greenish, bluish tint. Okay. I do start to see the top of the screen here, so I'm going to make sure that my mask ends down a little bit like so. You can play around with the brightness. You can play around with the opacity. You might want to bring down the opacity. That's T on your keyboard to bring that down as well. Something like that. We're just trying to show like as if the screen or the source of light is really bright where this hologram is appearing from. So that's starting to look pretty cool. And the last thing is a little light splash. So the last thing I want to do is add some light splash a little bit more so that it looks like when this hologram actually appears, it's starting to splash some green or blue light onto my brother's face. So I'm going to do this with an adjustment layer. So go up to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. Then I'm going to add glow to this. So back to our glow stylize effect. Drag that onto this adjustment layer. Now I'm going to drop this intensity a lot, 0.1. I'm going to leave the glow radius. That looks pretty good. But I do want to change the colors. So I am going to change this glow colors from original colors to A and B colors. So I'm going to set this B color to something like green, something close to this color. You can even pinpoint that color exactly right there. Maybe make it a little bit greener, a little bit more saturated. So if I turn this off, you can kind of see what's happening. It gets a little glow on his face. You can play around with the threshold and the glow radius. So I'm going to decrease this to something like 40 so we get a little bit more glow. But this is applying to everything. So I only want it to apply to Anthony's face. So again, we're going to use a little mask. So using the pen tool on the adjustment layer, we're going to create a mask going from the screen all the way up here. So kind of around his face like so. And then just close it off. Again, I'm going to press F to bring up the feathering to increase a feather. So if I turn this on and off, you should be able to see what's happening. We got to turn on our glow, of course. So if we turn on it off the glow, see what this is doing? It's appearing like this is shining on Anthony's face. All right, so we want this to turn on and off though, so we're gonna change the opacity of this layer itself after this pops up. So I'm gonna set T, or press T to bring up opacity. Here it's gonna be 100%, set a keyframe. At the beginning, drop this down to 0. And then same thing, at the end, we're gonna set a keyframe for 100% and then drag it down to 0. So now that glow or that light splash is going to appear, and let me drop the resolution playback so we can see it play back smoothly. It appears as the hologram actually comes up. So it's a lot of details that's being added. One other thing that I did was add a little subtle rotation to the hologram itself. So if I select the hologram window, press R, and then I add some sort of, I think it was the Y rotation. So what I did was I set a keyframe here at the beginning for where I had set it previously, go to the middle, rotate it just slightly, and then go to the end and rotate it back. And then I easy ease them. So selecting them all, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. So now you have this subtle rotation of the hologram, which just adds a little bit of style and motion, everything making it look better. So another thing I do want to notice or just say is, actually it's not too bad. The text could start animating a little bit later, so I could go into the hologram window and drag this over to the right, this first keyframe for the text. So it starts appearing after the hologram pops up. So this is pretty much all I wanted to cover. I know it's a lot. The thing is, you could apply this kind of effect to all sorts of stuff. You could apply it to video. I'm just using a picture because it's easy, but you could do this to video. It would be ideal if you did something with green screen, something that you rotoscoped out, or something that doesn't have a background. Most likely that's going to be green screen. But using all of these sort of effects together, you can get this really cool sort of hologram look. If you have any questions or thoughts or ideas for how to make this better, make sure you hit me up in the comments below. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy this tutorial and you can use some of the tips and tricks you learned in this tutorial to make your own holograms. Well, I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, please like and subscribe to the channel for more. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below in the comments. And if you're looking to take your skills to the next level, make sure you head over to videoschoolonline.com, where we have premium courses, more free tutorials and articles, guides, and all kinds of stuff that will help you become a better creator. Thanks so much for watching, and have a beautiful day.